Part 2. Let's make Trumptopia the United States of America again. Let's dance. Election Madness Countdown Update zeroed out and rolled into negative counter time because it's day 3 of Election Day here in Trumptopia. And you are joining me because you are curious what I gotta say about that and about what's going on and how it's unfolding. Thank you for tuning in. If you have not heard part 1, please tune in and listen to part 1 first. Hello and namaste, my friends, my audience family, my real life family. Should you be listening, please forgive me if you don't understand. It's weird. It's performance art. If you do understand, just play along. Thank you for tuning in. This is your favorite podcast that is a radio talk show styled semi-episodic, semi-abstract, philosophic, endless ramble by yours truly. Originally intended to be hosted by like a triumvirate of 3 people discussing current events, trends, headlines, news, etc., 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 vis-a-vis an analysis of the vectors or the intersections of a real, tangible, meaningful, pragmatic, and practical spiritual worldview. And, you know, the question, the fuck does that have to do with me and my life? Let's make Trumptopia the United States of America again, dear friends, because it might be a lot easier to then confront the flaws and inequalities and heinous issues and problems of what we thought was an okay, not so horrible norm of long ago in ye olde ancient times prior to the days of Donald Trump. And if you've been listening along, you'll remember that was toxic as fuck. There is no real normal in nature. There is nothing to make great again or go back to. We have to, the only way through is, the only way out of the The only way out of the prison is through. The only way, however that saying goes. And so here we are. It is part 2 of my 3-part coverage of today's roller coaster ride of when the hell is this election going to be over? Thursday, November 5, 2:33 p.m. Thanks for joining me. As I sort of indicated in part 1, and have distilled in this further bit of writing that I captured as a note quite earlier in the day, I think that no matter what happens, friends, no matter how this fractal finally unfolds, I would invite you all, we all, us all, the human species et al., to consider that we ought to perhaps do the following. That we should let us ourselves all heal ourselves. That came out a little bit redundant. Let us heal ourselves and our nation, my friends. No matter what nation you're in, heal yourself and your nation. Let us mend the broken bones of our society. Let us remember that we sort of kind of take that person we call Jesus sort of kind of seriously, and that maybe a healthy reinvestigation of those teachings and everyone else's teachings might remind us, through a multi-spectrum inclusive religious freedom means everyone gets to practice whatever they like as their religion freely, as long as it sticks to certain boundaries. And that's the one thing that they all have in common. And that all the ancient teachings and all the new teachings that might be considered valid if they are sort of for the greater good and not about war and profiteering. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Say no more, say no more. That they would all probably share in common a repetition of the fractal, which is, oh, by the way, one of the magical secrets of reality is that you can achieve a sort of transcendental, approaching enlightenment form of transformative evolutionary healing, and that some of those really critical steps required to achieve that is like mutual, not exclusive, all-inclusive spiritual healing and forgiveness, of the kind that requires a personal striving towards a direct spiritual communion with that thing we call divinity, which arguably resides inside of all of us, which therefore also means everyone else, and not a killing each other because God said so approach about it all. What does that have to do with elections? Well, rewind and spiral back out to where I explain all of politics from my perspective in previous episodes of the show, and forward in time, where I revisit the theme and reiterate the topic a bit. Brace yourselves, we might talk about... Sorry, that was a bad choice. I'm committed to doing multiple episodes today. I want to do a 3-parter about the election. And I also wanted to do another larger episode for another segment of my multi-segment brand of podcasts show, of many podcast shows. And I failed to properly prepare for lunch and other meals, and I find myself really tempted to eat this cottage cheese on the air, but that's gross. And sometimes when you're having a good conversation with people, you start talking with your mouth full of food. Please forgive me. I just sort of did that on my own show. And forgiveness, as I was winding on about earlier, is something common to all, or should be, I think, theoretically, to all truly enlightened spiritual practices. And we'll spiral back again in just a minute. But, that's where I come from, and that's why I say, no matter who wins, and no matter what the final call is, and no matter what shenanigans get played out right now in the intervening pre-certification period, and by that I mean, like, the election, the opera's not over till the fat lady sings. I didn't write that. I apologize, that's the saying, but that is the saying. And the election isn't over until the 50 different state-run election officials and their various mechanisms of, official state election running, however that chaotic mess gets deployed every time, certify it. And that's something that I am willing to kind of, a little cynically, but also in the sort of like the greatest good manifesting something that's profounder than the worst case scenario, and maybe a little bit better and a little bit healing, that there's something about that I'm sure isn't like Banana Republic level corrupt just yet. Who knows? Maybe it is. There are those out there in this dear old United States of America that truly believe, as though, like, almost with the same level of fervent disregard for all those who disagree, as those who might be blind faith, warriors for Christ, which I find to be a bit silly of a title, but no offense to anybody who may or may not love that title for themselves. I, as a very, very serious person, do not mean to offend anybody, especially anybody with a belief in Jesus. But we got to talk about that in a way that we don't, and that we really should. But that's a whole nother story. Independent of what, where we come from, we can focus, we can agree as a community of communities at a global level that in the face of everything that we're facing, we can indeed focus on healing and addressing that which, looking at, identifying, addressing, and dare I say, healing from the inside out, mending, repairing that which we might call the political echo chamber, wedge issue, divide machine of divide and conquer. Is that too much to ask of you, my fellow humans, this early in the day, when we don't even know who's going to be the president on January 21st? I don't know. I can't tell the future, but from what I've seen, I think I might be comfortable not stressing out about it. But I digress. There's a lot to talk about, friends. A lot to talk about. And where to begin? Where to begin? Where to begin? For those curious, I will say to you now, I believe that it is true, a true statement that we should all be able to rally around for the purposes of holding the system itself accountable, and ourselves, and each other, and America, and the history, that the following should be, ought to be, we can agree is, and therefore we shouldn't be arguing about things that don't matter in this regard, should be true. The following statement: all valid ballots and all valid votes, because those are technically two different things, but they live on one piece of paper. All valid ballots and valid votes must be counted. Can I get an amen, brothers and sisters? Can I get an amen? I hope so, because I'm going to leave you to ponder that and also say we've got a lot of things to talk about. I haven't even begun my actual coverage. I've just been winding things up. But news coverage is one thing, and let's say this. As of right now, from my perspective, I think that the echo chamber of echo chambers of news media is doing its job in the way and according to the worldview that I actually personally subscribe to, that it ought to, and that it's doing its best to be a voice for its audience. And therein lies the rub. I do not think that it's the worst case scenario out of all the possible evil scenarios of conspiracy theory about media. Although I guess I could be wrong, but let's not invoke that, right? Let's not invoke that. One way or the other, it is voting season. And oh my goodness, I have so much to opine at you about, my friends. But first, I want to cleanse the palate and leave you with just a wee bit of music. Jumping Through Hoops, a Drum Step 101 Lessons remix by the infamous, invisibly animated, as in I haven't done all the work yet, but I one day will have an animated little music video series of this guy and other characters singing along and eventually creating songs based on these weird templates. These are just like rough drafts of things that maybe we can turn into a song one day with other people that collaborate. And man, did I just ramble into butchering that intro. Here goes, dear friends. Jumping Through Hoops. Is that the one I was introducing? I believe so. Jumping Through Hoops. Yes, sorry for rumbling and bumbling that. Fumble! Voting. Does it matter or is it pure fantasy? That has been the dichotomous argument, question, wedge issue, dare I say it, that I've been confronted as an observer and non-participant in the election activity process. I have all full and complete rights to live in this country that we call the United States of America and do anything and everything else that any other person who lives here can do except for vote, right? Because I am a toaster oven from the wrong store. And that question and the sort of, I personally think, sort of subversive argument in favor of abdicating the vote has overshadowed almost every election in my capacity to observe the news and then have conversations with other people of all kinds, various ilks, about the process and about what's going on. And of course, there's all kinds of theories. People have propositioned, very many varying and diverse opinions and or theses or theories. What's the plural of I have a thesis? My thesis is, a lot of people have put forth their own individual interpretation on what the fuck is going on. Some people love cottage cheese. Some people hate it. I kind of hate it. And I wonder how bad the hate part is going to be this time around. I don't know. But I found it interesting that in the last 36 hours, Fox News has been pushing Biden in the lead. I could be wrong, but I think as of the last time I actually looked, he was attributed 264 electoral college delegate votes. But most everyone else has Biden down to 253. And Trump at 213 or 214. Similar to that, Fox has the Senate tied up with one more blue seat than the rest of the other channels. Now, that's not even necessarily a critique. That's just an interesting point of fact and a trend that I've noticed observing and flipping through channels and whatever. And I don't want to get sued. I just wanted to point it out and ask the question, does that mean anything? What does it represent? Can we interpret something about the way they covered the news as opposed to the way CNN covered the news and the way MSNBC covered the news, and glean some insight? Either way, I think the most interesting thing that seems to be true based on all of the hours of reporting from all three of those major channels, plus the occasional going over and looking at BBC and looking various other news outlets and sampling what they've got going on once or twice over the last 2.5 days. Throughout, and this is surprisingly or not consistent with the Biden's campaign's own narrative, that the polling that showed him with strong leads is consistent with this strong, although very close race that's playing out. And fair enough. Am I towing that line just because I'm sort of leftist stooge? Hell no. And if you're going to just assume that and project that against me without actually listening to what I'm saying, then you're drunk on the Kool-Aid just as much as anybody drinking the blue Kool-Aid is, except your Kool-Aid is sort of like a bright orange, red, pea yellow, and you think it's better than theirs. No offense. I said that with love in my heart, and if I were a Care Bear out of that Care Bear cartoon, which I hope they never sue me, but I'm totally going to borrow them and repurpose them and use their art at some point as I appropriate them into my storytelling in the future. And I'll probably have to come up with some cheesy ass name to not get sued by them and let it know that it's spoof and parody and comedy. But I would beam at you, dear friends and listeners, after saying that, during saying that, as I said it, loving, gentle, politics is showbiz, and you got a little too caught up in it maybe. Take a big breath, relax, put your ideology down, and forgive yourself, and let's refocus, because that's what's going on right now. I think that's the big. If there's a big Schumann resonance wave thing manifesting anything, I don't think anyone's going to be unzipping their I got my third eye open and I can step out of my bodysuit and just appear as my etheric being, my meta. I don't think anyone's going to jump around in their meta being sans bodysuit anytime soon. But the pendulum is swinging a little closer towards that shit, my friends. And that shit will be easier to approach under a Biden-Harris administration, which hopefully endures for a re-electing both of them for a second term. And then, if I may be so bold, dear friends, pausing. Remember that at the beginning of my show, somewhere, it might be on one of the sort of lost tapes, but I've referenced it a lot, and I swear to you it's true. and I've said this long before the show existed, in like two people's faces, that this is sort of like an echo chamber of pendulum swing testing political methodologies to their extremes. If there's anything weirdly odd and corrupt about politics at a meta level, is that there's a little bit of that going on. And that includes the horrible but seemingly ubiquitous urge to slippery slope fight our way against ourselves on the uphill battle against tyranny. Because what is tyranny? Put a pin in that. We're going to address that. Not from I think we've already addressed it from like the open a dictionary and read what it says sort of perspective. But from a deeper spiritual sense, and not from any one brand of spirituality, but from the organic, do you breathe and shed blood and sweat and poop and look at the sky and go, what the fuck is going on? Because that's where we are, one, much more realistically than we are over any ideology. And politics ubiquitously has a couple of ingredients in common that leads us to achieve certain conclusions, I think. Although perhaps I could be wrong. Who knows? But to finish my big, weird future thought, I won't be surprised that come January 21st, it's a Biden-Kamala Harris administration. I'm not going to pretend to have predicted it. I will absolutely cop to acknowledge and openly discuss about fervently praying for it as opposed to any other possible outcome. A peaceful, non-eventful, everyone kind of decided to stay home and fight the flu and or COVID and or both and or none of it because they think it's all imaginary, but they feel a little off and they don't know why, but something's about to fucking bitch slap them in the face. Kind of like 3 months of holidays remembered but not actually done in person. Because hey, at a big level, like, hey, if you're okay with opening up the economy and letting a few grannies die, you can also probably be okay with taking 1 year off from having to do all the traveling and the shabba, right? Like, ugh, what a mess. You've always kind of loathed it. We can do one sort of like, everyone, chill at home. And those of you who need to protest, maybe you'll love the idea that, like, holidays you're just going to protest holidays and not do them as a means of protest for everything that you personally want to protest, as opposed to burning things in the street and or getting arrested by cops and or, I don't know, marching around with military-grade handguns and maybe getting seduced into the folly of shooting at each other. Not that I want to take your guns away. I don't. Don't get distracted by that. I just don't want you shooting at each other either. Because I care. And shooting yourself and or other people in the skull and dying from that doesn't solve anything for anyone. I'll be so bold as to say. But I digress. Politics. Where are we at, 2020? There are people foaming at the mouth, wanting, literally or figuratively, and every time I say this, I feel bad because am I guilty of helping to invoke it? Probably, just by fucking saying it, right? But you gotta know that it's true in order to, like, choose to take its power away and work with it. Because I think it's already out there. It's not like it's imaginary. But people out there who want a civil war 2.0. And I don't. And if y'all have to, can y'all go have it in the wild, wide opens of Westworld or Texas world? No offense, Texas. I really thought you'd turn purple. It's a wild, wild thing what we're seeing. And it's a wild, wild set of arguments going on around it, which, if I were to summarize in my own personal, way too wordy don't know how I can make it any tighter and more concise sort of meme, it's this. Typical Trumptopian, right? Like, is it, I almost wonder, like, I want to quote it. Because they do kind of parrot the same things and almost verbatim. It's like somebody hands out a copy-paste boilerplate thing every day and they're all just like mixing and matching it. Not 100%, but a little bit, right? Like, how do they do that? Oh, right, the word magic. Okay, I digress. If you haven't heard that episode, I don't remember what episode it's in, but someday, when I revisit all this show from the future, I'll have cross-indexed it, and you'll be able to go, aha, it's episode number 42, and I'll go listen to that right now. But that's just a random example. I don't think it's actually episode 42. And I am really curious, what is episode 42 of my own podcast show? Because I don't remember. But here we go. Typical Trumptopian. Quote, this election is proof that the NWO is threatened by Trump or some variation thereof. Like, that, you know, is scared of Trump and he's beating them. Something like that. Literally me. Period, as in, like, pregnant pause. Question mark, as in, like, my brain is hurting that you just said that. But also, how the fucking you just said that? Really? Is that what it looks like to you? For reals? Because it doesn't. Because that looks like the weird, sleazy thing that they're lying to you about it being. And that sounds kind of self-evidently obvious that it can't be that. And then, my response. So, you're telling me that A, you believe in some variation of the various theories that there is a level of elite that is the most powerful elite, and they are a group of, like, profoundly evil bad guys that do profoundly evil bad things in order to control the whole world, and that they have very intense, strict control of it, and that they have directly, personally, pre-selected and screened and chosen and appointed all those who get installed into the office of the Supreme Power, you know, like the office of the White House, the presidency of the United States of America, and arguably all others, vis-a-vis the mechanism of, like, basically choosing from amongst themselves and or their low-level echelon wannabe plebes that are trying to be big players in the game of being the ultimate elite in the dark corners behind the, you know, the dummy elite that are there to distract you as scapegoats. And these people are the ones who put the Clintons and the Bushes and the other people who have been presidents and other positions of power in those positions by hand because of their intelligence and their wit and their power and their allegiance to dark forces, apparently. And yet somehow the person that you choose to believe is not some other puppet playing some interesting and outlandish role for that mechanism of elite controllers and puppet masters, because all the world's a stage, but is somehow actually Donald Trump, and he really somehow managed to outwit them and outsmart this whole mechanism. Because I have a really hard time believing that they wouldn't have coddled and selected him and groomed him personally to be the perfect sort of idiot savant of useful idiots to be hypocritically his own worst enemy and a puppet for the New World Order, as opposed to the God-chosen orange person who manages to outwit and outsmart all of them. And I don't know if it is the fact that he's a former television reality TV show host, and a horrible, lousy one at that, because I am a media consumer and I've got my refined opinions about my media, dear friends and listeners. And he, in the world of reality TV show hosts, and just TV show hosts, if you want to open it up, TV show hosts. He hosted a TV show. Forget reality TV or not. It's on TV. He was the host of it. He was a lousy, unentertaining, uninspired, predictable, boring host to watch, who sounded, on his better days, like someone who's got a handler and manages him and sort of runs a script for him, even though he doesn't memorize a script. And reminds me a lot of like an orange Richard Nixon, or a Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, hybrid for the evil dark side. And there is a really great meme out there that I wish I had made, which I did not, because I do not actually have that level of Photoshop skills for the blending of the two faces. Unless it was one of the new ones where it's automatic and you just point at the two pictures and it just does it for you. And I hate those, because they used to be something you had to do by hand like a fucking painter, except with your mouse and not a brush. But I digress. Orange is the new dick. And you really think that the evil elite that are in league with Satan and doing all those crazy things would be outperformed by a former reality TV show host and general sleazeball who's, cheated on all his wives by raw dogging porn stars and or erotic models. So essentially making him a wannabe playboy in the Hugh Hefner style sense of the word, which is, of course, categorically, to a lot of people, automatically dumping him over in womanizer, especially if it's all done with money as opposed to like consent and some sort of well-informed and well-thought-out cultural thesis, because I don't think he has that. Who ultimately, and this should not be forgotten in the current ebb and flow of such hyper-active news cycles full of cacophony of noise and distraction, that he is $400 million in debt, dear friends. Now, it should be said at this time and in this moment, because I don't want to be accused otherwise, I'm not here to defend Joe Biden. I'm taking a kind of like leave him alone approach, because Trump's the crazy person in office that I would really like to get out. And like I've said before, my objectives personally, in terms of advancing public discourse ideas worthy of great debate and analysis and maybe consensus building, is that instead of spending billions of dollars and hundreds of hours of nervous energy and ulcers, I don't mean to evoke that, but I can just imagine how many people have like frazzled themselves over politics before there was even a 2020. And now 2020 happens and we still got crazy politics that have become the most absurd they have ever been in my 44 years of being trapped on this planet rock. This womb of yours that you are slowly destroying instead of honoring and treating like a living womb, which is a much deeper issue and that will not be solved right away just by voting for one team or the other. I just think that with the blue team in charge for 2 terms plus a bonus, whoever they send up next is just going to be a solid shoe-in tidal wave win because no one wants to go anywhere near Donald Trump, and one of them is going to try to take over one of his kids. God bless her heart. I think it's probably going to be Ivanka, right? But maybe one of the boys. No, I think it won't be Ivanka. I think it'll be one of the two boys. Maybe like they'll run. Oh, if I was in charge of the cartoon show that I was writing about making fun of all of this as a cartoon, I would choose for both two of them, like Beavis and Butthead, to run as running mates. And they're going to have this cartoon presidency run as running mates attempt. And I just saw that in my mind. I don't know if anyone else has said this out loud. And someone's going to accuse me of just parroting some left-wing media bullet point. So I really don't believe anyone on any channel I've watched has ever suggested this might happen. Because I guess maybe they don't want to invoke it. But I'm sort of invoking it now because I would love for it to be something that happens and kind of magically happens just like I imagine it happening now. Because the way I saw it, this is not something I wrote, friends. This is not a sketch. I literally saw it now live on air while I was talking to you, which is the way I do this show. And is that like they sort of counter-announce against whoever the establishment party nominates in the primaries, the way what's his name ran, got sort of coerced into running now. And bless his heart, I can't remember his name right now. I got like 10 of the people's names barking to try, of other artists trying to come out of my mouth. And I'm like, I know that's not the guy. Stop. At any rate, y'all get it. And it was funny. And I digress. We have that guy in office. We have Russiagate, Russiagate, Russiagate. I don't get any money from Russia. His two sons on live television the next day or within the 36 hours of him saying something about something because they were pressing him and they had to like pretend not to, said that they totally do. And he has said that he totally does. And the bank records show that he probably does have a lot of money coming in from like not just the Trump Tower deal he pursued in Russia, but whatever he says, he's proven himself to sort of lie about it, joke about it, lie about it some more, maybe sort of tell you the truth about it, kind of in some way that's counterintuitively right there in your face, but it blends in with his malarkey, and then come back and lie about it again. And then maybe tell you the truth some more a little bit somewhere else, so that you feel like you've gotten somewhere of truthiness with him. He is a master of Stephen Colbert brand word truthiness. And of course, to a certain degree, I think Colbert invented it as a way of critiquing that whole mindset on the right, which is what, not just recently, not just in the last 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, 11 years, 25 years, but in the last 100 years, in the last 200 years, has led us down the path of thinking certain ways in a tribalistic duopoly. And I know that it's had its nuanced differences and its, various other parties at various times and in various strengths, etc. But here we are. The path has brought us here. And did COVID go away, dear friends, magically on November 4th, the way Trump pretended it was going to? No. As a matter of fact, as of yesterday, according to World of Numbers special live updated COVID calculated number crunching spreadsheet of statistics, of data here, I'm looking at the column for new deaths sorted for the United States by state. And the sad part is that as of yesterday, the total of Trumtopian deaths, and I say that with meaning and purpose, friends, the number of Trumtopian deaths, not that they were all Trumtopians themselves, because some people are still Democrats, and some people are still Republicans, and some people are still active, abdicate the vote, non-voter types, etc. But we are all collectively living in the delusion that is Trumptopia, because there is a Trump in the administration, and they are calling the shots and pulling the levers, and manifesting the chapter of historic history making that we've just lived through. We've lived through like a really horrible 20-year-long chapter of crazy politics in just 4 years. And 1,201 people died needlessly, in my humble opinion, as of yesterday. Yesterday alone, 1,201. In addition to whatever else was killing people. And I get it, folks. Death kills them all at some point or another. And I am cynical enough to sort of sit in that space with that thought and understand it and embrace it for my own sanity, because we must indeed face our own mortality. But we must also face other truths too. And that's that if our own actions lead to other people's deaths, how do we not count that as murder? And as a society, we have failed to prevent those people's deaths. And I'm not the kind of guy to be like wildly saying that other people have, theoretically speaking, I'm not making any accusations here, other people's bloods on their hands. But others have and will, and have been so bold publicly on the social sphere of, social media discussion. And I will say this. I do think the virus is real, and the politics of pretending that it isn't has led us to this place and this razor's edge election that, as of the last time I checked, it is now a bit of time. I'm going to now check with you guys live, and it may be not the most scary sounding number or the most up-to-date information, whatever we find. Because I'm not going to open that panel because that'd be like the wrong channel. What, Facebook? No. I'm going to go to... I'm just going to type in election tracker 2020 live. That was the number one Google thing already. So lots of people have been searching for it, obviously. And this must be the Google one. According to the Associated Press, that's the thing that is linked to, the entity that is linked to as the source from this page that I just typed, election tracker 2020 live, with no news outlet specifically called out. And we got 264 electoral college votes for Joe Biden and 214 for Donald Trump. As I was saying, I was going to do a little bit of deeper dive earlier, and we'll come full circle and maybe try that. It's quite interesting how these things play out. But I will attest to you now, to your friends and listeners, especially those of you who might be relatively young out there in the world, in terms of the audience hobby sport of following politics, political process, and political outcomes. This delay in counting does not smack me of anything too horribly unusual. Let's remember that not too long ago, during Trump's own reign in power as the ultimate temporary king and overlord of these grand old United States and its crickety, weird-ass, systemically flawed system of supposedly self-governance that is actually really tipped in favor of certain centers of power that maybe we should really reform and review and reform. It using a civic and democratic process of representing ourselves and to each other and building consensus, dare I be so bold as to say. Election night and election times always have the thrill and suspense of drama of how the dominoes will fall. And it's interesting. And this year is interesting. Excuse me 1 second. And the dominoes have been falling quite fascinatingly indeed. As my own media outlet, vis-a-vis my opinion talk show theme styled podcast show that you're listening to now, I'm going to tell you this, friends. Pennsylvania is sitting in a very interesting position. And should Biden win it, which is not outside of the realm of possibility, although people on the right might disagree and might argue otherwise, I think it is, and at least it was last time I saw the most recent updated numbers as being reported by all three major, like, left, right, in the middle, mainstream media cable channels. Pennsylvania is and will go down in history for this in this election, which is my observation I'd like to make. You heard it here first. Not only critical, pivotal, has always been central and sort of key. And at this point in time, I don't know if they've called it yet. Maybe I'm being a bit of a shark jumper. Maybe they've already called it. But it's 3:20 p.m. and I'm about to take a break, smoke a bowl, and check in on the news and see what's going on. But as far as my ability to tell, I don't think they have. I'm going to open up... where's the Google one? Hello, Google. Election tracker. Live at 3:18 p.m. Too close to call just yet. And neither one has reached 270, right? But quite brilliantly, that amazing... and I love what they call themselves. And it just literally, like, brain fartedly fell out of my head. They are not the sovereign state of. They are the good, honorable state of. No, but they call themselves a funny thing. The Old Dominion of? No. They call themselves the... I just saw someone reference it. Forgive me, Pennsylvania. You're all yelling at me. If anyone... as if the whole world were listening to me as part of the many things that they listen to for the coverage. All the listeners in Pennsylvania would be yelling out, where the this, whatever that is. Pennsylvania has got the privilege of being the only way at this point, with 513 or 514 being the maximum number that he's been projected to win, because let's remember, folks, even when he won last time around, at this point, 3 days after Election Day, it was still a projection until the certification process and until the Electoral College meets and does its shenanigans. Hopefully there aren't any weird or abusive or corrupt shenanigans this year. There's been some talk, which we'll have to put a pin in and talk about it further. But, and if he doesn't, there's no other way, no matter what other state Biden does or does not win. And that, I don't know if Biden's going to win Pennsylvania first or not, or if Biden's going to get it like a Nevada or Arizona. If those two, if like Arizona and Nevada fall one way or the other. I mean, it's not impossible that all four of those other battleground states, Georgia and North Carolina, get determined before Pennsylvania do. and no matter what happens, it'll be a thrilling, like, final, quadruple 1-2 punch of whoever wins is going to say they were always destined to win, and whoever lost is going to grumble and complain and maybe ask for a recount. And I want to say it now, folks, before any of the post-projection calling shenanigans begins, I would support a complete 50-state, state-by-state recount with full-blown, bipartisan, tri-party. Give me a third party in there, not just the Republicans and because if the problem is, I'm going to drop your needle on a record here in a hot second, but the fundamental problem I see about all the controversy going on today on this 3-day election day, which I have some brilliant solutions for. And we'll get to those in part 3. And there might be a bonus French part 4 to this, because I got a lot to say. But the primary argument is that this process and this date is exposed to fraud, but it's speculative. And in Pennsylvania, they're making a really speculative claim that hinges on the sort of intellectual tool or trick or magic disarming maneuver, in my humble opinion. I would characterize that as like a magic trick of getting you to forget that the election officials themselves who do the counting are the ones that by law, election law, state by state and federal-wise, we've already entrusted our trust as we the people, or you have, y'all, because I'm technically not a voter, right? I'm just a talking toaster machine from the future. But those are people, that's their eyes. So all of this Trumptopian television play acting about how we can't see the votes and we don't know about the votes and they're not letting us see it that I'm hearing is hyperbolic. Now, is there corruption? Maybe. Is there a few? Did we hand wring and worry and argue and debate about voter fraud enough over the past 4.5, 5, almost 6 years? Thank you, Donald Trump, because he has been the sower of seeds since the day he rode down the escalator and started pushing his pendulum swing as far as he could into Trumptopian tyrannical dystopia quadrant as possible. Of course, yes. And am I a fool for not worrying about it so much, but wanting to trust that in the greatest likelihood, if we're going to talk about numbers and figures and likelihoods and statistics, statistically speaking, Occam's razor and all the other logical things you could debate and blah, 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 from my perspective, from sitting in the chair of my consciousness and my collective understanding of things, and the 44 years, it feels like 444 years sometimes. Although, man, if I am stuck here for 400 plus years, I will be excited about year 420. I should write a short story about that, putting a pin on the board of things to come back to. Woo! Thanks, friends. I never would have thought of that, but the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's 420th year stuck on planet Dirtball. A short story for your reading pleasure. And now, this Disco House Remix 101 Dream Sequence from the album End Times. Take it away, DJ Zed, playing it live for us on his actual apparatus. Pray he doesn't screw up and make it sound dumb. Coronavirus is real enough, folks. Wearing masks and taking other risk reduction measures under appropriate circumstances are not tyranny. Sending in paramilitary soldier cops to kidnap you off the streets without reading you your rights and having a probable cause / warrant for your arrest is tyranny. Stay tuned. Coming up next, friends, we're going to talk about my plain and simple critique of the duopoly as it stands. Lots of people got opinions on that, but I haven't really. I've told you I disagree with it, and I don't support either side of it. But I've got a deep and profound introspective analysis of why it is. Why it is the way it is. Start connecting the dots. Also, if you're interested in that and you don't want to wait, because I might be a couple of hours before I get back on the air to do part 3. No offense. I kind of want to see if they announce a projected winner before I do part 3 so I can just wrap it all up and celebrate that in part 3 without having to do a... Well, we'll see how it plays out. But also I got to eat and I got to make more tea to protect my throat. But I'm going to talk about, in part 3... my honest and genuine thoughts that might be a little bit silly and satirical and fantastical about how we could reform electoral politics at a simple, structural way that I think would be A, more productive for achieving like the greatest common good and helping us advance the cause of refining towards a more perfect union, to invoke some patriotic stuff, because, you know, I do believe myself to be a patriot in my own way. But until then, friends, hang tight and, hug your fam and friends and neighbors tight, because the system wants your violence on the street, and we should not give it to them. I might actually read a bit of something specific at the opening of part 3, given sort of like the inspiration that I'm feeling and the vibe that I'm going to be running with. So as I close out this particular middle episode, this fat sandwich meaty chunk of the 3-parter, I'm going to close out with the intro to my segment of subsegments, my subsegment of segments called Unauthorized and Explicit Readings. If you have not checked out any other episode prior than the ones you've heard today and or yesterday or so, because you're such a delightfully new and fresh virgin-eared listener of the show, I humbly invite you to A, check out the opening of part 3, because I'll kind of do a little mini sample of what that's like. And also, while you're waiting, because it may be 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, I might wait for part 3 until I know for sure who is the strong, solid, probably to be contested projected winner vis-a-vis your standard reporting procedures on the mainstream media. Because despite all the conspiracy theories, friends, I'm not going to blindly defend any institution, but I'm also going to go, maybe we should question the conspiracy theories and realize that they're not as real and as lucid and as intense as we might think they are. And I'm biased, folks. I'll be honest. I'm biased because I've got my own meta theory. And my bias is, I think it's most likely that my meta theory of everything, which some would label a conspiracy theory, which would have been a radical conspiracy theory should I have given it and shared it out to those in the conspiracy theory community that were chatting with me and amongst me as I sort of dabbled my feet in it 30 years ago. but that may or may not be anything that any of the Johnny-come-latelys of today would love or immediately embrace. But the whole purpose of this labor of love that I call the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's free love radio radical podcastism. That's not what I call it. That was an attempt at coming up with a new title for the show by just improvising and rambling my way into one, and it didn't come out very good. So ignore it. But I am I'm pondering myself the question, should I rebrand? Currently it is the Almost Daily Zencast, as hosted and or narrated by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo, brought to you by Collaborative Theater Artists Studio, a studio of collaborative theater artists. By all means, I humbly invite you to go check out some of those other episodes in my show list entitled, or including the acronym for, Unauthorized and Explicit Readings, or UER for short, and we'll use this intro as an outro to close out this show today. All of my disclaimers and warnings apply to this and every episode. And I swear to you, friends, hands on a stack of Bibles if you want me to. I promise you, I'm not a shill for anybody but my own self and my goddess muse, Gaia, and her goddess muse daughters, the divine feminines, or divine feminine et al. Bundled into one, however you want to look at it, that no one is telling me what to say other than my own creative imagination and kooky madness, or perhaps Mother Earth herself, or perhaps that which you might call God in the feminine divinity. And that I'm here to speak that in a masculine voice, not because I'm a lesbian trapped inside a man's body, but although I made that joke because I used to quite legitimately, long before today's sort of movement of trans acceptance, used to self-identify as that, like very early on in my young adulthood. And it used to offend people of every type. And I'll stick with it because I think it probably still does. And suck it. It's my stand-up. I can call myself what I want. Having said that out loud, I entreat you to please, oh please, join me for more. There's a lot of it yet to come. And as you can see, I have lovingly worked my little tuchus into creating that content that's already up there, ready for you to listen to on the Sprecher.com and 1,000 other platforms. That is a comical exaggeration, not a legally true claim. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your heart. Do not be confused. This sounds like the intro to a show, but I'm playing it as the outro. I will stop talking at you after this, and I will take a break, but I'll be back for more, and I hope you will too.
Warning. This podcast contains material that may or may not be considered appropriate for the average Trumptopian household. Listen at your own risk to unauthorized and explicit reading. Disclaimer. All rights to literature referenced are retained by appropriate entities, and no infringement is intended. The reading of any and all literary materials referenced herein is done expressly for the altruistic purpose of genuinely facilitating the species-wide pineal gland activating, third eye opening, transcendent spiritual enlightenment of all of humanity. Any and all opinions expressed herein are exclusively those of the imaginary talk show host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. And now, brace yourselves for unauthorized and explicit readings.
You yourself are the abyss, opening below you, as well as the bridge you must cross. You are the path you must follow, and the mountain you have to climb. You are the inner room you must find and occupy. And when you rest there, you'll realize that you are the cloud above you in the sky. You are the rain falling and evaporating again. You are a drop of water that will soon become a sea. Only then will you know God. As quoted in the law of light and self-development from the O manuscript, both of which are by the author Lars Mull.